Hey there, it's Les Solgrove, and hey, it's the official last full day of summer. Tomorrow, sometime during the day tomorrow, we switch over to fall, and has really nothing to do with the topic today. It's just a benchmark on what day it is, September 21st. In the news the last couple of weeks, there's been some talk about the county assessors and the county assessments going up on property taxes. And while there's nothing we can really do about that right now, the time's going to be coming next spring that we can. And so I thought I would just basically take a minute today and explain a little bit about property assessments and rollbacks and how your property taxes are assessed. Again, you can't really do anything about it this year. You have to wait until next spring when the new assessments come out. But at least you'll have a background, a little bit more information about what taxes are. So let's just jump in today. It's a little presentation I put together called Property Assessments, Rollbacks, and Taxations, Oh My. And you can fill in the the four-letter word there, whatever you want to call it. But this is basically how property taxes are calculated in Polk County, and it should be the same across the state, but I talk specifically about Polk County here today. So let's jump in. You've all seen this cartoon here. Your home is seen by you versus your buyers versus your lender, and of course versus the appraiser. Of course the assessor is the one that sees your property as the Taj Mahal. And again, earlier this week we saw an article from Polk County saying that home assessments are going to go up by about 22% next year, and that's a record hike. And, they're claiming that, home values are up, and technically they are. But, it's COVID driven. I just am curious as to whether they kind of jumped the gun on this, because I think we're going to see home values kind of level off the next couple of years. And here we are seeing a huge increase. So I don't know, just be ready next spring to protest your taxes if your taxes go up dramatically. But anyway, just to give you some background, let's talk first about what is a property tax. And it's basically, it's tax on real property, basically, which is real property in the real estate world means it's something that's attached to the land, which is essentially either land, building, structures, or improvements that are on or in the land. Something like a house, a mobile home, or a regular home, fences, paving, those kinds of improvements are all what contribute to this valuation. The taxing authorities, obviously, is the county, and essentially what they do is every other year, and on the odd years, they go back out and they reassess properties. And the property taxes are basically billed and collected by the county. And there are taxing authorities such as the cities, counties, school districts, and townships, and colleges, and fire protection. Basically, this is where your money ends up going when you're taxed. And the state of Iowa currently has over 2,000 taxing authorities, and but most properties are taxed by basically more than one. You'll see an example here in a minute. We're not going to see taxes on 2,000 different taxing authorities, at least here in Polk County. So who pays this property tax? Well, basically anybody who owns, that are not exempt, that owns or operates property in a residential, not operates, but owns property in a residential situation, agriculture, multi-residential, commercial, industrial, and utilities and railroads. All these different entities all basically have some sort of a tax liability throughout the lifetime and use of that property. The primary recipients. Now, this is the people or the businesses that basically benefit from these taxes. Obviously, your schools, the local cities and counties, hospitals. Obviously, even the assessor, they collect a small fee to give you the pleasure of charging you for your taxes. But if you think about things around the community, like county works, city works, for example, a lot of the street repair money comes from property taxes. Obviously the the hospitals, they feel like hotels. The hospitals, the county hospital is run and operated from county tax money. So, and of course schools is another big one here. In fact, this is a breakdown of a specific property here in Des Moines, and it looks very, very confusing, but really just over here on the left-hand side now highlighted, you can see that on this particular property, the amount of property tax that is collected every year for the city of Des Moines is about 38%, a little bit more than 38% for the city. Schools are getting about 35, a little over 35%. The county's getting an additional, they're getting 15.67% of that total. And then down the line to the point where, it drops off. The state of Iowa gets a very, very slim portion of the property taxes that are collected. And you can see how it looks this year versus last year. And we'll talk a little bit here in a good example of a specific property and how the taxes actually changed this year versus last year. And that's not going to be the same next year because things are going to change as we go. And you can see here across the taxing authority area here that, they were collecting $664 million in taxes this year versus $639 last year, and the percentage change. What we're going to focus on today is basically on a single property because that's really how it's best related as the consumer. So essentially, the first thing they have to do to determine how taxes are assessed is they need to determine the value of the property. And the assessor, or in some cases the Department of Revenue, estimates the value of each property. And this is basically what we call our assessed value. And this value is supposed to be at actual or market value for most properties, for most property taxes. This is directly off their website. We'll find a lot of times that assessed values are not anywhere close to actual market values. Sometimes they're above market values, but for the most part, a lot of times they're below market values. And so when the consumers are out there and they're looking around, they're saying, well, but the assessed value says it's X, but they're asking why, and why is a much higher number. Is that an accurate, offer or list price because the assessed value is much lower? And the answer to that is basically no, because assessed values really, they're not taking into account the actual condition of the properties, which real estate professionals are inside the properties. The county assessor is rarely inside of a property. They're going based on, what they know about the neighborhood and not necessarily that specific property. So that's one of the main reasons why assessed values are not close in numbers a lot of times to the actual or market value. Basically, the assessment of all taxable properties are added together, and then the assessor totals this and reports it to the county auditor. So basically what they're doing is they're trying to calculate how much value they have within a taxable district so they know how much they can pull from as they need for services like cities and schools and county and city things like that. So property taxes, the department also basically assesses the valuations and equalizes those. We'll talk here in a little bit about a rollback and what a rollback is, but what they try to do is apply this valuation evenly across all taxing districts. And you might have one area that's much lower in condition and values versus another area that's much higher in value and condition. And so the rollback basically is a method of kind of equaling all that out and making sure that, one particular group is maybe not being taxed as much or inappropriately or unfairly to other areas. So the rollback is a very important aspect of the property taxes. And a lot of times, as they say on the site here, it's used in response to inflation. Well, I sure hope that if anything's good going to come from inflation, that maybe the rollback will be adjusted higher in the next couple of years. We'll see about that. Don't hold your breath. The other thing that they do for the county assessments is determining what are the budgets, because they need to know, what are the costs. It's just like a typical budget. You've got the cost of services versus the amount of money they can use to pay those services. And if the budgets go up, well, then obviously taxes are probably going to go up. If budgets go down, then taxes could, logically go back down. And so that's a lot of what has to happen when they're determining assessed values. So one of the questions is, why are rollbacks important? And really, it was over 20 years ago. Property values were rising very quickly, and it sounds like today, right? To help cushion this impact of the high inflation, the legislature basically passed an assessment limitation law, and this is called the rollback. And essentially, statewide, if the statewide increase in values and farms of homes and farms exceeds 3% to revaluation, then their values are rolled back, so the total increase in aggregate value statewide is 3%. So that kind of helps level off that playing field a little bit. And I wouldn't be surprised. It takes a while for some of this to come to fruition, but it's not unheard of that maybe the legislature will look at the rollback percentages again as we move forward, and maybe that's where we'll get some relief in property taxes again. It's kind of like a throttle on an engine. It kind of holds things back there, or a governor, I should say, not a throttle. Governor is a good word, but a governor in the term of an engine, which basically limits it. Other things that determine how property taxes are set is they have to come up with a tax rate, which is also called the tax levy rate. So it's basically a percentage, or not a percentage, but a number that they multiply the assessed value by. And then that is actually the what we call gross tax, the amount of taxes before any credits are subtracted. And number 6, we as residents in properties, if you're the homeowner and living in the property, you get a tax credit for living in the property. It's called a homestead credit. If you're a military personnel, you can typically receive some sort of a military credit, all the way down to complete credit of all your taxes if you are let's say a veteran that's been injured and you've got a disability as a result. There's some elderly tax credits. There's all kinds of different tax credits out there, but this is basically the what helps determine what we call a net tax in the assessed value range. So we have gross tax and net tax, and the net tax are basically the gross tax minus credits. So what causes property taxes to change? There's basically 3 variables that's going to do this. Number 1, the combined budgets of the taxing authorities. And again, there's our taxing authorities off to the side there, at least on this particular example we're going to use today. If the city budget goes up, school budgets go up, the county budgets go up, something to that effect, well, then the tax valuation is probably going to go up, because that's those are high dollar items within the budget that need to be covered through taxation. The total value of all properties in a taxing unit. So let's say there's a huge development that comes into an area, and it adds brand new homes, and it's all developed, and the taxes for that area now are contributing more to the overall value of all the properties. That can raise property taxes as a whole. And then, of course, your own individual property. So this is the pride of ownership. When you own a home, you take care of the home. You basically do additions or improvements to your home. That adds value. And of course, then the county says, you have higher value because you've taken care of your home very well. So therefore, your taxes can change based on that. Conversely, if you are not keeping your property up and it's being run down and lots of things like that, then your taxes could technically go down as well because of condition. So reasons why your taxes may go up is, number 1, budget increase. We talked about that a minute ago. Taxable value of all the properties in the property can remain the same, but the budgets can increase. Another reason that taxes can go up is because the budgets and the taxable value within the government unit remain the same, but the valuation of the individual's property increases. So, if your property is improved but everything else remains the same, your taxes can still go up. And then, of course, if everything goes up, budgets go up and the valuation and your property maintains, you can also see an increase in taxes. Again, conversely, if a downward turn, if budgets decrease, if there's not as much expense out there and the values of all properties stay the same, then we don't need to collect as much. We, as in Polk County, doesn't need to collect as much for taxes. Same thing as if the property values go down, but the taxable, budgets and stuff go down at the same time. So it's all pretty much related to whether things are going up or down. And a lot of times we hear the question is, why are my taxes higher than my neighbor? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, because each property is looked at on an individual basis. A larger house with larger square footage that maybe has more bedrooms and more baths and it's newer is probably going to be taxed at a higher rate or a higher tax than a smaller home of older condition that's maybe only got 2 bedrooms and 1 bath, for example. Obviously, other things that can change the difference across the board is maybe you're living next door to a veteran, a disabled veteran, and they're getting a full tax relief from the property. Their taxes would be 0 in that particular case, or a percentage of the taxes. Of course, their taxes are going to be lower based on yours. If a property next to you is a non-owner occupied, so let's say it's a rental property, there's not going to be homestead credit on there. So it could be a couple $100 difference just based on that alone per year for taxes. So here's an example of a parcel card from the county assessor, and just wanted to point out some things. There's, some of these are highlighted in yellow, and they're just to kind of give you an idea. But the top marker up there on the yellow is the market adjusted land value, and this property is currently assessed at $43,326 for the land value. And then there's this point taken times 0.920. That's your rollback percentage there. So basically they're saying that the land value is essentially now going to be taxed at $39,860. So there's one example where you can kind of see the adjustment for land value based on the rollback. At the bottom down here, you see in also the green at $198,170. Well, that's basically all the factors about the property, and I've just highlighted a few of these. So, for example, this particular property is 1,079 square feet on the main level and above grade, and they take that times a dollar amount, contributory value dollar amount, if you're familiar with that term at all, and so they're basically saying that the above grade space of that property is 124,312. There's basement area. There's total base cost of the house is 207,222, or value of the house. Then it goes into some additional features like, does it have gas forced air versus electric heat? Does it have a heat pump versus gas forced air? Does it have window air versus air conditioning? So these are all the different valuation adjustments that they can make on the property. A home without a fireplace, for example, would be likely assessed about $7,000 less than an equal home next door to it that does have a fireplace. So you can kind of see how this goes up and down the line. Near the bottom, they do start to take into account condition and physical depreciation. And the particulars of this are property to property, and it's based on a, pretty much whatever the assessor feels is good and average from what they know. So if they drive by a property and the outside is in very, very good shape, they're going to assume that the inside of the home is also in very, very good shape. If they drive by the house and it's in very poor shape, then they will automatically assume that the interior is of equal condition, and it might give you a different rating or a different adjustment there. So what you can see is you take 39,860 plus 198,170, and they actually round it up. So then down in the bottom, you have 39,900 and 198,200, and there's no agricultural valuation on this property. It's simply a residential property. So this parcel of property this year is now assessed at $238,100. And again, they rounded that up from the adjusted numbers there. So 238.1. So keep in mind, there's that 238.1 there again in the center of this next screen. And this is the property tax bill assessment. And basically what they're going to do, first of all, they're going to apply an overall rollback now to that 238,100. They're going to do that rollback off the assessment. So they're only going to tax of that $238,100, they're only going to tax $128,884. Okay, so there's your first step of having a rollback involved here. $128,884, and then the net taxable value is at $128,884. The next thing we talk about there is the levy rate. The levy rate is the $43.20826 per thousand, basically, of the valuation. So 128,884 times 43.208 gives you the gross property tax amount of $55.68. And this is the number that the gross tax is now being charged against the property for the year. And then you get down below and you'll start to see there's a homestead credit. So this particular property is owner occupied, so they receive $209.56 removed from that $55.68, and then the ending up that net annual taxes is $53.60. So that's the total amount. And they do round these numbers occasionally or often, so that's why you do the math. It doesn't quite exactly want to add up, but they do round those numbers to a round number. So the net taxes on this property are $53.60, and if a homeowner were making homeowners mortgage payments to that, they would be paying 1/12 of that amount in their mortgage payment, most likely, or if they did not, if they're paying these taxes directly to the county, they would be paying those in 2 installments every 6 months, in March and in September. So now, one thing that they will do on this property tax bill is give you an idea of where your assessment was from last year. So every year they kind of do this reassessment, but every 2 years, 2023 is the next year that they're going to do the full-blown reassessment. But 2020 taxes were based on a different number than 2021 taxes, and that's why your taxes go up and down every year. Now, what's kind of interesting here is you look at this, 2020, this particular property, taxes went down by $40 a year this year compared to last year. So how is that possible if the assessed value is higher? How does the net taxes actually go down? Well, let's take a look at that. Number one was last year, the rollback was a little bit different. The rollback number that was applied to the assessed value last year of 225 instead of 238 this year was a little higher percentage on the rollback. So the rollback taxable amount was 126,921. And on the other side is this year, you'll notice that the levy rate actually dropped by about $1. And sometimes these are tax credits from, let's say, the 1% sales tax for Polk County. Maybe they didn't spend all the tax dollars that they thought they were going to spend, and they rolled this back and said, hey, we can lower the levy. We're not going to lower the tax, but we'll lower the levy, and therefore then your taxes might go a little bit lower. And that's kind of what we've seen happen here in Polk County. If you recall, the first year that Polk County finally got that 6 cent or that 7 cent 1% local option tax, taking us to 7%, that was a year where taxes, the levy rate actually dropped. And we saw a little bit of a pause, I believe, that year in property taxes. Now it's kind of come back again here. But anyway, that's just the example of how property taxes can actually go down, even though maybe the assessed value goes up. So kind of circling back to the beginning of what I was talking about is, what if we disagree with your assessment? What can you do? Well, right now, you really can't do anything because there's a period of time that property owners can appeal your property assessment through a local board of review. That time period is from April 2nd through April 30th of the year. And that'll be enough time next year that, when we start to see the new assessments come out, this is where you're going to probably get fired up and you're going to say, hey, I want to fight my taxes. You can't fight them right now because the assessment period is not open, but it opens in April. And just to kind of get prepared, and I'll probably repeat this, sending this video out next spring. At the time, you can basically disagree with your assessment, and there are certain actions you can take to fight that assessment. You can argue that your assessment is not comparable to other properties of similar size and similar condition. You can also argue that the home is assessed at more than its actual value. Maybe you just purchased the property and the assessed value is higher than the sale price, that's usually a pretty good indication that you can fight the assessment and possibly get it lowered. Maybe at that point the property is exempt from taxation. Maybe it changed from a residence to a church situation, or maybe there's a something to that effect. So, or maybe there's just simply an error in the assessment. So again, the place where you appeal that is the Property Assessment Appeal Board, and there's actually a website. So I would say start to become familiar with this website between now and next spring. I'm getting a little fast ahead with the buttons there. But the Property Assessment Appeal Board is paab.iowa.gov. And that's a great resource as we wait for next year to kind of come and see what the assessed values are going to do. There's a lot of resources in here on the quick links. For example, how to appeal your assessment, the appeal process, preparing for your hearing, how to collect and gather that information. So I think it's probably a good time next year to kind of look back and say, look, I know property values have gone up. The county assessor believes they've gone up by over 20% this last year, and that's what they're forecasting. So chances are there's going to be a lot of appeals in the appeal process. And so if you're prepared ahead of time, as we get close to that time, work with a local realtor, do your research on the county assessor's website to find what comparable sales are doing. The biggest question I would always ask somebody is if you're going to appeal your property values, the one question you should probably always ask yourself is, if you could sell your home for the assessed value of the property, would you feel like you are getting your dollars amount? So that's putting yourself in the position of being a seller. Obviously, when you sell, you want your assessed value to be higher. You want to feel like you're getting the most value. But if you answer that question, no, this house, we couldn't even get that if we tried to sell it, then chances are good you have a good case to at least try to appeal that property assessment. So anyway, that's kind of the story today. I just wanted to bring that up as we start to get into the fall season. Next spring's going to come very, very quickly. And be sure and visit that Property Assessment Appeal Board. And if you have any questions, reach out to myself or if you already have a realtor or real estate professional, reach out to them and say, hey, next spring, put me on the list. I want to talk to you about my assessed values as they become assessed. I want to make sure that we're not paying too much for properties and property taxes. So with that, appreciate that. If you have any questions, you can leave questions and comments below in the video comments. And of course, this is on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. So obviously, please hit that thumbs up button so that I know you're getting some good out of what I'm presenting to you today. So that's it for now. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you all soon.